2018, she also served as Director General of Securities and Exchange Commission. In this position, she was responsible for regulation of Nigeria's capital markets, including the Nigeria Stock Exchange. She has held various positions in Treasury, corporate finance, teaching, and research over the course of her career. She holds a Master's of Business Administration from Harvard University, a first-class honors Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from the University of Nigeria. In recognition of her contributions to the economic development and to transforming Nigeria capital market, she was awarded the Officer of the Order of the Niger and National Honor. She was recently named one of Africa's 50 most influential African women by Forbes Africa in March 2020. So we welcome you, Arunma Oteh, to the platform, and I've been trying to get you for 4 years. Finally, you are here.
Thank you, Pastor Poju. I wished you weren't going to say that, but one of the leadership qualities you have is perseverance. And thanks to Zoom and you, I'm able to join from Oxford. I want to use this platform to say a happy Independence Day to you, to all your viewers on the platform, and to all my brothers and sisters, Nigerians. I must start, Pastor Poju, by commending you and your team for what I consider has been sacrifices to enable Nigeria realize its potential through its many initiatives, but particularly through the platform, which I understand you started 13 years ago. Well done. Thank you also for the opportunity that you've given me to share my reflections on as we commemorate 60 years of our nation. What I would like to do is share with you my perspectives and my reflections of Nigeria 60 years on. So I have a slide deck, which I would like you to permit me to use to share these reflections. So the first one for me is, what do I consider my perception of our nation today, of where we are? And the phrase that comes to mind is abundant poverty. Why do I say that phrase comes to mind? We've had efforts that have been made, but we have to be honest with ourselves that we have a lot of low rankings, that we are carrying last. Even though as Nigerians, we say Nigerians know they carry last. Whether it's the World Economic Forum Competitiveness Index for 2019, whether it's the Corruption Perception Index that has been mentioned previously. But some of our human capital outcomes are ones that make me weep. We have 90 million Nigerians that live on less than what I can spend on coffee here at Oxford, on less than $1 a day. None of our universities today, and I'm a proud Nigerian who went to a Nigerian university, is amongst the top 100 universities in the world. 31% of Nigerians don't have access to clean water. 58% of Nigerians don't have access to sanitation services. Despite our efforts on power, despite having solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, 80 million Nigerians don't have access to grid electricity. Security issues have been talked about. We should not have a nation that has a problem with security. It's a fundamental issue that we must tackle first. Our governance is weak. Our politics is killing us, permit me to say. Our execution is weak. We have a poor implementation track record. Our states are physically weak, and our local government areas. We have many inefficient agencies, despite the best efforts of everyone. Many of our services are poor. We have very poor public financial management. We have a policy environment, a legal environment, a regulatory environment that's difficult. But for me, the biggest challenge, and Jared Cohen mentioned it, is corruption. The last few months have been salacious revelations. And for me, who's sitting outside, I haven't seen what's been done concretely. Oxfam estimates that from 1960 to 2005, Nigerian public office holders stole $21 trillion from the Nigerian treasury. And $21 trillion for me is significant because that is the GDP of the United States, the wealthiest nation in the world. I have reports that Nigerian lawmakers have some of the highest paid in the world. In fact, from what I hear, one person's monthly salary can pay 475 Nigerians minimum of 30,000 naira. Yet many state governments don't pay that minimum wage and owe any of the workers minimums of salaries. Similarly, I hear that Nigeria is spending 4 billion naira for some former governors and city governors. Yet many Nigerians have died because they've been owed their pensions. We have a landscape dotted with elephant and unfinished projects which run into trillions. This is challenging because we have a global crisis. The IMF estimates that our GDP will contract by more than 5%. Our debt service is huge and averages over 60%. And in the first quarter of 2020, it took almost all of our government revenues. Our unemployment rate is still very high and it's expected to be more than a third of our population. But our country is great. I have not lost hope. And I have not lost hope because this is a nation of abundant wealth. I'd like to just share a few pictures to demonstrate that. And I like this picture very much because it covers all of the nooks and corners of Nigeria. Nigeria is endowed with diverse agricultural produce, as this map shows, and we can feed ourselves, we can feed West Africa, we can feed the rest of the world with what we do in agriculture. Similarly, we're endowed with solid minerals located in all parts of the nation. We need the political will to end illegal, or a more politically correct word, artisanal mining, and make sure that those germs that people see in specialized roadshows around the world, that those germs are ones that are creating wealth for the nation and for Nigeria. That they're not because people are stealing bits of it, because we have not put together what we need to put together in terms of a framework to enjoy the wealth that belongs to Nigeria, God bequeathed Nigeria. For me, though, the most important, as I've always said when I've had the opportunity to speak, is Nigerians. I believe Nigerians are the greatest people, are some of the greatest people on earth, and there's 206 million of us today. By 2050, we will be the third most populous nation in the world. And as Derek Cohen said, it is a large market, so we can play to that strength. And we can also play to the strength that Nigerians are hardworking, we're enterprising, we're resilient inside and outside of Nigeria. How do we do that? Nigeria has to work for all of us. We must empower the youth. 80% of Nigerians are younger than 40, but that is not reflected in the things that we do. Youth are the backbone of a nation that wants to claim the future. So we must do things that enable our youth to excel. Women make up almost 50% of our population. We must make sure that women have the same opportunity so that we can enjoy gender parity, because we can add more than $200 billion to our GDP just by empowering women. Women have shown in many countries that when they're in leadership position in politics, in business, that they outperform. And if we empower women, we can tackle poverty much more than we're doing today. Now, how do we claim that path? I like this picture because I don't know if everyone on this program has watched Black Panther. Black Panther is a movie that talks about an African nation, Wakanda. That is the nation that we should aspire to be. So let me talk about my own ideas about that path to my Wakanda, Nigeria. Many of the speakers who came before me have talked about what we need to do in infrastructure, what we're doing, what we need to do in politics, what we're doing, and many other areas. But I want to start with our values. We have to go back to those days when I was young, where the society ostracized people who did wrong and celebrated people who did right. So we must focus on integrity. We must focus on discipline. We must have empathy and love for each other, respect, transparency, accountability, and leadership at all levels. Leadership starting in the home. I'd like to share a few thoughts on 3 areas: finance, on education, on technology. And in fact, Jericho made some of those points. I believe on finance that we must empower every Nigerian to be financially literate. We must make sure that we're mobilizing domestic resources, institutional and retail. We must have an ecosystem that matches the enterprising nature of Nigerians. Venture capital must flourish. We must have patient, medium to long-term capital. We must have risk management products. We must have vibrant markets. That's how you protect your financial system. Whether it's the banking sector, other credit markets, insurance markets, capital markets, they must have the depth, the breadth, and the level of sophistication that matches our nation, Nigeria. We must have innovative products, particularly for infrastructure, for small and medium-scale enterprises. Nigeria can flourish. We should not have a nation where Nigeria has flourished, people have flourished in spite of the odds that Nigeria bequeaths us. The government must do its part in fiscal, monetary policies, and legal and regulatory regimes. And I would like to make a plug for more privatization. We need to list some of the commercially viable entities on the Nigerian Stock Exchange so that they can enjoy the sunshine of governance that comes from when you're listed, but also so that more Nigerians can participate in the wealth. And the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Project is an example of an exemplary institution that's been run in the public sector, which can be listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange and many of the subsidiaries of some of the government agencies like NNPC. I believe education must be treated as a human right, and all children, poor and rich, should have equal access to the best education. We need to focus on science, technology, engineering, and maths. We need to focus on entrepreneurial skills. We need to make sure that our curriculum is bringing out people that can work in those great banks, those great telecom companies, companies like Main One, companies like Flutterwave. I mean, when Jared Cohen mentioned payment systems, I thought Flutterwave is doing a great job. It has a partnership with Ant Financials, but Ant Financials today gives 600 million SMEs in China loans, and it's not worrying about whether they'll default on that credit because it has systems that make sure that it's able to monitor that. So a first-class education is key to building world-class institutions. And we must use education in the way many Asian countries did. And the example that I'd like to cite is that today, our GDP per capita is almost 30 times less than that of Singapore, which is $65,000. We need to take that path on education. Jared has already talked a lot about technology. I have been open about the fact that digital literacy is something that we must arm ourselves with. When you see what happens in China, where the far-flung rural areas are buying things via e-commerce platforms, it's in their local languages, then it shows that there is much more that we can do. Technology is a driver of development. It fosters innovation, growth, and equality if used rightly. And for me, we have an example in our nation. 20 years ago, Pastor Pojo, we had 700,000 cellular phones or telephone line connections. Today, we have 200 million connections and still counting. And a lot of that was the liberalization of that sector. But what I want to say is that we should have a vision of arming everybody with a mobile phone. Because in my mobile phone, I have a bank, I have a university, I have a hospital. Because we should have that mindset that every Nigerian can, whether you're in the rural area or you're in the urban area. We must, as I talked about artificial intelligence, we must be at the cutting cutting edge of this technology. I've seen what our technology entrepreneurs have done in Nigeria. So big data, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, we should be at the forefront of it. That is a nation. That is who we are. We never carry last. Finally, I want to say that we must focus and care for Nigeria, all of us Nigerians, both literally and metaphorically. And metaphorically, I have tried to use Nigeria as an acronym for N stands for that sense of urgency. The globe has a crisis of health crisis and economic crisis. We have a political crisis. We have a national crisis. So we should have a sense of urgency. And not the leadership of the country, all of us. I've talked about integrity, I for integrity. Let me talk about growth. We should shift from the sharing culture to having a growth mindset. And when I say a growth mindset, I see that the Honorable Minister of Finance is on the line. They should not just be waiting every month so that you can make miracles and give them money. They should spend the state and be growing the pie so that we can benefit from the work that God has given us. We need to focus on excellence. We need to put our best foot forward. A friend of mine always said to me, I'm not going to have my brother who's not a pilot a plane. I want the best pilot to pilot a plane. We need to focus on execution. I know what to go through, Pastor Poju, to deal with platform. We need to restore and rebuild our nation. We need to focus on innovation. The climate change industry provides us a $6 trillion economy that we can tap into. But most importantly, Pastor Poju, all of us need to be part of this Nigeria, my Wakanda. All of us are guilty. We should not just blame government. We should not blame other ethnic groups. We should ask ourselves, what are you doing? All hands on deck. Nigeria also must work for everybody. Rural, urban, public, private sector. Young, old, men, women. I'm sure that the thoughts that we've all shared today, if we together say, what will we do differently as a result of this platform, that we can make Nigeria, my Wakanda, a reality and not just a movie. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take about 2 questions. Can you hear me, Aruna?
Yes, I can.
All right then. First
Can
of
you
all,
want to ask me questions? Yes.
All right. The first question is going to be on public service. You chose to leave your international role at the Africa Development Bank to join the Securities and Exchange Commission as DG for 5 years. Looking back, how difficult was the task of leading a vital institution in the creation and preservation of wealth in Nigeria? And what is your take on what it will take to get the right, that's experienced and reputable persons, into our politics and public service to derive better and proper outcomes for the long-term success of this country?
Pastor Poju, that sounds like 3 questions. So I'll start with your first one. The first one was why did I leave my role as a senior person in an international agency to come back home? First, it's a privilege to serve our nation. Second, it is a privilege to be able to impact society. And in public sector, we always are able to impact society much more than we can imagine. Third, and you asked more specifically about the challenges or the issues around leading the kind of organization that I had the privilege of leading, the Securities and Exchange Commission, Nigeria. Absolutely, first of all, a recognition that it is an important entity. And so being humbled by the importance of the work that my colleagues and I were given. Second, it was post-crisis. So one of the things for me that was important is making sure that all stakeholders were on the journey with us. But people understand when they've lost money. So it was post-financial crisis, people had put their savings into the Nigerian stock market and they lost their savings. And so when we embarked on our rescue mission, which we termed turning Nigerian capital markets into world class, everybody was along with us in that journey. I'll pause here to see whether I've answered your two questions, your two-part one question, or your three-part one question.
So the third one is, what will it take to get right, experienced, reputable people into our politics from public service, all right, from the corporate, seeing you came from ADB into...
Yeah, and I'd been in the private sector at the beginning of my career. Yeah. I think that first you need people who have a mindset of service, and I've seen a number of people make that transition. And so what it takes is, first of all, how people perceive how people succeeded if they came from the private sector or from international organizations into government. So the fact that they felt that those people were successful at what they embarked on. Secondly, that people supported them to succeed. But what would it take as an individual? I would suggest that people need to, first of all, be people who care for the nation. They need to be people of integrity. And as I said in the presentation I made, we need to put our best foot forward. We need to have the best people. Brazil, Japan, a lot of them have the most difficult exams that you take to join public service. So we should make sure that it is our best that go into public service. We should also support those who are in public service so that it's not a place where people who survive because they can take bribes and accept bribes, that those ones survive more than the people who are of integrity. So there's work to be done by the state, there's work to be done by the individual, there's work to be done by society in supporting people who really care and are most qualified for public service.
All right. I'll take this last one on capital. Extreme poverty is generally eliminated by improving the overall well-being of the country, which is really a long way of saying creating wealth in a nation. There was a time that the capital markets in Nigeria were exciting and retail investors participated in equity markets and understood to a limited extent what it meant to own a piece of company and grow wealth. How and what, so there's the question, how and what will it take to harvest local capacity to create wealth versus the constant dependence on FDIs as a source of investment capital?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Fantastic.
Very well.
Sorry, because on my side it was saying that my audio wasn't working. First and foremost, it's an absolutely important question because what paid for my education was actually the stock market. My parents invested in the stock market, but also, I would also say that the reason I'm a finance person is that my father made me read annual reports of companies he and my mother had invested in from when I was age 8 at the dining table. So I'm someone who's benefited from what you've just described. But what will it take? It's really an ecosystem that starts with financing options that foster entrepreneurs. I'd mentioned the fact that we need to have capital that is patient. We need to make sure that Nigeria is the preferred destination for investors, whether you're a foreign investor or a local investor. The government needs to play its role. Market participants need to create relevant products. We will not be able to create wealth if we do not have products that will ensure that retail investors can invest, that institutional investors can also invest. Issuers of companies need to prepare themselves. Investors must be knowledgeable. Finally, I just want to make the point, because I'm often asked about international investors versus domestic investors. Money doesn't have any preference in terms of destination. Money will stay in Nigeria, will not stay in Nigeria because it likes Nigeria. It will stay in Nigeria because it feels that it is safe to invest in Nigeria. Not not even Nigerians, invest in Nigeria because they love Nigeria. So we must get things right. Must get the macroeconomics right. We must get the governance issues right. I mean, hearing Jared, say that people should not have to invest illegally. We should address those issues that concern investors, and they concern domestic and international investors. But we must have an ecosystem approach. Everything counts in creating a nation that is leveraged. We're already wealthy. We just need to realize that wealth and make sure that Nigerians can share that wealth.
Thank you very much, Arunma. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule to be with us at the platform. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be the